I think what I was trying to get at is, when we talk about men's mental health, right?
Hmm.
Majority of the time, instead of the people to focus the messaging to the men,
Yeah.
they are like wives, girlfriends, side chicks, sister, like,
Mm.
and it's like, Ebe, like I showed you a video today, right? We are
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about addiction, right?
Hmm.
If you are going to make a video on addiction, targeting addiction, what has side chicks and girlfriends even got to do?
Got to do with it.
In a side chick, I'm just here
Mm.
for the money. You know?
So I think it's sometimes it's what it messes up the messaging, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm doing couples therapy
Yeah.
with I'm doing couples therapy and the man is addicted to a substance, right?
Mm-hmm.
I will share some tips with the wife that can be helpful,
Okay.
right?
And there
So
may
I
be
mean,
time that you can even share with her to leave, right? It's not
right,
safe
right,
for her.
exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
right? 'Cause so for example, if the wife is doing some things that are enabling the behavior, right? We will talk with the wife like, yo, these are enabling behaviors, those need to stop,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But she can't possibly be the primary target of the message to stop the addiction that is somebody else's addiction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You understand? Another example, whenever we are discussing actually substance use, drinking, right? So if I'm talking to two people and the man has a family history of addiction and his own addiction and he's working towards sobriety, and the woman doesn't have any issues with addiction, so she doesn't mind once a week or so a glass of wine.
Mm-hmm. Having a glass. Yeah.
A glass of wine, right? So if your husband is actively working towards their sobriety, it's probably not healthy to have wine around the house because
Yeah.
you enjoy your glass of wine once a week or so, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm. It
yes, I
doesn't mean
would,
you cannot drink. You can have your drink, but
right?
not
But
around. Yeah.
exactly. So I would talk to the wife and say, as you are part of the process of helping your husband achieve sobriety, let's reduce the exposure to alcohol in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So sometimes, yes, that's, I guess, the extent of talking to, I mean, some of examples of talking to a wife
Mm-hmm.
about their husband's problem. But
Okay.
it
And
gets
that's
really,
like even psychoeducation or
yeah, it
trying.
gets really murky when on the biggest scale, you're making almost sometimes your first video
Mm-hmm.
about the topic of addiction and you're targeting like it's almost like when I watched the video you showed me, it's like they said very little to the men who are actively in the addiction or the other men who, because I mean most of this, it was gambling addiction, and I think in Ghana especially it's typically
Nigeria.
sports betting. Oh, it's Nigeria, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I reckon it's
Mm-hmm.
typically sports betting,
Yeah.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
people who are actively in sports in a
The
culture
men.
like Nigeria are the men, right? So really, that broad messaging
Mm-hmm.
has to go towards the men,
Okay.
because w- what's the, I don't know, like a broader message targeting women just isn't the way to go. I feel like you lose
Okay.
so much in the mix, you know. So it's a balance, it's a balancing act, except that I think for many people, we just don't, like everything we're putting it on the woman. Like they at some point they have to be exhausted, you know. So yes, I'm right there with you that the broader message cannot women cannot be the target
Yeah.
for the broader message when the problem is primarily a problem of men,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
Mm.
And you speak to, right, like the differences in therapy and the differences in um media or education, right?
Mhm.
So
Yes.
if you are given the education, then you are trying to educate the public, right? Okay, here are
Hmm.
the signs, right? These are some of the
Yes.
signs that you may notice if your partner is doing this and that. Like you have a broader way of looking at it. But and then if I am in therapy, then it's individualized. So in that relationship, I'm going to consider the relationship, the dynamics, and all of that before even telling somebody's partner, okay, this is how maybe you're going to help, right? And
Right.
even in most of the time, let's say if I do addiction, if there's addiction in a couple relationship, sometimes we even stop and say, okay, maybe you need to go into treatment before
Into
we can
individual therapy first. Yeah.
go
Yeah.
do individual treatment or
Work.
go detox or whatever before you can even get into, you are not ready for couples
Couples
therapy in
therapy.
a way. You're not ready
Yeah.
for this yet. So go figure that out and then come here. But when we are given broad messages, I think it becomes difficult. And it's the same for when we are talking about domestic violence, intimate partner violence, when the media is often, or people are like, why didn't you leave? Like if in the media your thing is why didn't you leave, you are missing the point. Versus me as a therapist, I can ask a client, why
Yeah.
didn't you leave? There is a different connotation to that, right? We are
Mm-hmm.
unpacking things there where they are learning about themselves versus you in the media, you don't care.
Yeah.
You don't care
Yeah.
if that person comes
Good.
and says, oh, maybe this is why I didn't leave or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. You don't care. So I think
Yeah.
we have to differentiate between education, where education should be a certain way, and
Mm-hmm.
then what people do in therapy should be a certain way also. And then I'm also a firm believer that there are some certain topics people shouldn't talk about. You
Yeah.
have to have the expertise. And this is
Yes.
not
Mm-hmm.
elitist or anything like that. But there are certain topics that you need expertise before you can talk about
Speak
it.
on. Yeah.
You cannot just tackle any
And
topic.
there are even some topics that, especially when there is so much identity involved in it,
Hmm.
you have to back off and let the people that are in it, the specialists in the, so I don't know if, I don't know an example for it, but so for example, if there's an issue that
Yeah,
primarily affects the Black community and
yeah,
you know a lot about the issue, but you're
yeah. If you're
white,
a non-black
I feel
person,
like
stay away.
I feel like you
Talk
don't
about
get
it.
to be the thought leader in the conversation. You
Exactly.
understand? You have a
Yeah,
great ideas about the thing, but you can't be the thought leader in the conversation. So
exactly.
I think there are some situations where even if you are an expert, you stay back and almost like you
Stay
help in the
back
background
and let
support
people with like, yeah, yeah. I
and
get what you're
support
saying.
people
Like,
to lead the conversation. Yeah.
yeah,
So not be everything you go talk to someone. It's not everything that you should contribute to. So definitely if you
yeah.
don't have the expertise in certain areas, just back off.
Hmm.
And again, if there are some things too that is just not your issue to speak to. I think for the TGM is the Ghana Music Awards. So many people are talking about all of the dressings that, and stuff like that. And I think everybody is allowed to have an idea, a feeling about how somebody dressed, right?
Dresses,
But
right?
I
Yeah.
don't. I feel like there are enough
People nothing
women.
about fashion.
I feel like there are enough women bashing some of the women that dress a certain way. I don't have to join that conversation. You understand?
Even the
Like,
men saying that, some of them, it's not this.
wh-
It's not the place for this.
yeah, but you get my point. Like, there are certain
Mhm.
things that, as maybe as men, there are certain things that there are enough women talking about it. We need to back off, let them talk about it. I remember, I think we were on a live once, and I think there was somebody asked me about what about women that will open it for anybody. It wasn't. It didn't even last 1 minute, and you started speaking about close your leg, don't open it for anybody. Hula la. I'm like, let's discuss that. Like I need to stay away from that topic. I think many people it would land a lot better coming from Alice
Mhm.
than it
Mhm.
would coming from me. And it's communication. We're trying to send
Yeah.
messages where people need to hear it. And if
Mhm.
certain identities that I hold mean it will bounce off, then
Mhm.
there's no point saying it
Yeah.
because again,
Yeah.
it won't land.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
So men's mental health, like men will hear more men. Men need to hear from men, right?
right.
They will
Because
listen to
honestly, there are certain things that some men will very quickly say, you ask for you're a woman, so you don't understand it.
exactly. You are too emotional when you're talking about
They
men's
they
mental.
they, they will not add that, but
They will. Oh, you
so
haven't heard that. They will. Oh, you know
I've
that
heard,
you
I've
one
heard.
day, take one
Mhm,
day and go through my comment section.
mhm,
They will shock you. Your
yeah,
gender. It's not the place for that. Your gender.
yeah,
Hmm.
I've heard
I'm
so
even
many.
surprised. I'm even talking about their mental health.
Mhm.
The way they
Well,
act.
but we are grateful. We are grateful for still hanging in there with us, right? Because yeah, so there are certain things that it will be helpful if it comes from somebody that they can relate to, or at least somebody that they respect. I think our men will they put a lot of premium on respect. So when they respect you, sometimes they can hear you, or when they feel you, they can relate to you. You understand what it means to be a man. Then they can hear you. So every now and then there's a reason why sometimes I show a little bit of what I do and what I have, right? And it's strictly because many men attribute some men attribute success to financial success, right? So, some men attribute success to how much money you have or how high you've
Mm-hmm.
gone in your field or whatever it is, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you're saying something that's they are very easy to not agree with, if they feel like, well, I mean, he knows what he's talking about. He has this,
Oh, okay.
that.
I get you. I
It
get
will
you.
it
Yeah.
will force them to sort of pause and actually listen, because
Okay.
you understand if you
Dr. Beast has a nice house.
so
So
then
he
if you
can
if
say,
I'm suggesting something that can help maybe with savings, all right,
yeah.
and if you think I'm broke, you probably will go you understand. But if you know that I'm not broke and I'm sharing
Mm-hmm.
some tips that can help you save, or some tips that can help you get a house, whatever it is, or maybe have a healthier, stronger family, you probably are more likely to listen.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's why sometimes every now and then I show a little behind the scenes of my life,
Mm-hmm.
because I need people to know that you don't have to be an a-hole to make it or to do well. Right? I'm not suggesting that I have made it, but sometimes almost as if you have to be an a-hole to do well, but it's like it doesn't have to be that way. And I want people to know that the other day I said on I think you were on a live too, where I said that the life that we have now, we couldn't have it on my salary alone,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for anybody who has seen, I guess, the inside of our house at least, and gone, you know what, that's so cool, I would love to have that someday. Well, I'm telling
Mm-hmm.
you, we didn't do it alone. Support your
Mm-hmm.
partner, build each other up, and maybe you can get there, right? So
Okay.
somebody who would have been tempted to say, oh, if I'm crossing free honor, probably pauses, because he has already seen the house and gone like, I would like a place like that. And then maybe actually listens and incorporates some of that into their day-to-day life. So yeah.
Okay. I'm looking at the time. Yeah, and an hour
Yeah.
mark.
Yeah.
So
But I'm
you
enjoying this.
some of the questions, I vet the questions. So if I filter your questions and I'm like, I won't answer. So this question, I didn't like it, but it was asked by a woman. So I will ask you, how can women get men to be more emotionally vulnerable?
Right. I think I saw that Blissful asked it, right? No, so in a way, I think we sort of answered it when you asked me about if my wife did anything to make me feel
Mm-hmm.
safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this one is strictly because it was asked, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to be more open, I mean, to be
Yeah,
more of a safe space for your partner, then that means
exactly.
that
Mm-hmm.
that means that if they in fact open up to you, you can't judge it, right? you
Okay.
can't you can't be like, but why are you saying these things? Well, you asked me. And
Okay.
I've actually told Laurentia one time that I don't tell you everything that goes on in my head,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because sometimes I'm still processing thing in my head. I'm
Okay.
still working through it. So I can't tell you everything the moment it comes in my head, because some of them don't make any sense
Okay.
yet, right? They don't make any sense yet. But if for some reason you want, almost like a front row seat to my thoughts, and I in fact share them with you, and maybe I preface it by, I'm still thinking through, I'm still working through it, then I need you to receive it, as in,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., at the very least, non-judgmentally,
Okay.
right? But if you ask for me to be more open, and when I'm open and you're like, why would you think that? Like, why would you do this? Why would you do that? Well, then I probably won't tell you the next time, right? It's not, I don't think it's necessarily a lack of accountability as much as, well, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
understand? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's my thought. Like, and again, we're not talking about maybe somebody who is abusive or anything like that. Like I'm
Yeah.
talking about if you are in a relatively good relationship, but you want your partner to be more open with you, right?
Hmm.
Then when in fact they are more open with you,
Hmm.
like you can't judge it so harshly. So effectively, a good way to provide that safety is limits the judgment when eventually that vulnerability comes. And I don't think people actually do this, but don't use it against them later in an argument. Right. I honestly don't think people actually use,
I mean, but
do
also
that.
if it's an argument,
Well,
like we all want to win. We
all's
all
fair in
want
an
to win.
argument.
Oh.
Mhm.
We all want
Well,
to win. So
so it's one of the
we
reasons,
have to
right?
find
So,
something that will dig them. I bet
right.
show my kuma.
And then after that, then I won't open up again, right?
Yeah.
Then everything else would be, you would have to find your own, things to use in an argument, because now
Mhm.
I won't tell you anymore. If you have a problem with, if you want me to be more open, and
Mhm.
I do share something with you, and in an argument you want to push the dagger in, so you bring that up, then I'm never giving you ammunition to use against me again.
Mhm. Yeah,
You
yeah.
understand? So yes, I think. Um, but I think ultimately, like, bringing it back to when you asked me about it, like continuously building a safe space with all of these small moments of openness,
Mhm.
because in a way that's how the safety builds. I don't think
Yeah.
that
So it's not
that's
overnight, right?
yeah,
It's
and
not.
it's not even based off of a conversation. Like, it's not so much that
Yeah.
we talk about it and then we start doing it. No, it builds over time
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
smallest of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's more like experiential, right? And
Hmm.
you, the person, let's say this person is asking about women. So if let's say you are a partner, right? Not just any random woman on the street, but you are
Hmm.
a partner, it's it's more about doing than asking, right? I think it's more
Yeah.
about doing, and then in asking, maybe you are asking to update what you're doing, right? Kind of just checking in. Hey,
Yeah.
maybe, are you okay? Or emotionally,
Mhm.
how are you
How you
doing? And
doing? Mhm.
that stuff that so the person is going to see your actions
Mhm.
and like what you're saying, also it applies to almost all relationships, right?
Yeah.
Parental relationships, siblings, friendship, all relationships that you of course want to build that trust. And when people trust you, they can tell you a lot of things.
Thanks.
And that's also what therapy is about, right? That
Mhm.
as clients build trust with a therapist, they share more and more and more and more. Like you would think you know your client, and then they will come and tell you, "Oh, did I tell you what happened to me 5 years ago?" And you're like,
Right.
"I
Yeah.
thought we were
We knew
cool like
everything,
that,
right? Hmm. Yeah. Well, and
right?" So,
another thing
so
too is, I think we have to let our spouses, especially, so this is from Blissful, we have to let our partners out, the men, express how they want to express.
okay,
Right. I don't. So this is my impression of two women having a difficult conversation, like something bad has happened, like it's almost
hmm
in a solemn space, like we're talking in a almost like, I don't know, like that vibe, where it's like we're taking it easy, and the expression of empathy is more calm,
hmm
and stuff like that, right?
hmm
If that's not what your partner needs, following expression, or if your partner's expression of how they're feeling doesn't have that same tone, don't force it. I don't know if that makes any sense, right? So I don't know. There are times when, like, you ask, somebody would come in and like, "Hey, how was work?" Yeah, no, it was one of those days, man. My boss said this, or this happened, but they say it's like almost like nonchalantly, and you reckon that all of that happened, and you are just, like, you expect him to be more sad about it, right? If in the past he wouldn't have told you, right?
okay,
If in the past he would have kept it to himself, and you want, him to be more open and vulnerable, and now that he has shared with you, you express your empathy, but don't, like, don't force for the sharing to be more emotional. I don't know if that makes any sense, right? Like, it has to come over time, you know.
okay.
So
I
if
get what you're saying, but if also you tell me something and I have follow up,
no, please ask your
then
follow up questions, right?
okay.
But
Mhm.
this, so it's actually, I've had a couple clients in my space whose partners, the men aren't nearly as emotional because this person who is in therapy, of course, is more in touch with how things are going for them, how they feel, they have the
Yeah.
language for it and stuff like that, right? And they expect that of their partner who's never set a foot in a therapist office,
Okay.
right? So you expect a
Mhm.
certain language, you expect a certain composure when they're speaking about certain topics that you feel are tough
Mhm.
things, but they're
Mhm.
not there yet. And
Okay.
sometimes when you push for too much to happen too quickly,
Okay.
that can be
Okay.
problematic. So that's what I mean. That's what I mean
Okay.
by, like almost like do it, one step at a time. Because really, for some men, one of the things too is if it's not really on my end, at least, if it's never been a problem, then there's nothing to fix, right? So if you
Okay.
think your partner isn't vulnerable and being more vulnerable could be helpful, right? To them,
Mhm.
it's not a problem.
Okay.
So if you're pushing for more vulnerability and you're pushing too quickly, it's like, why are you doing so much when it's
Mhm.
not a problem for me? Like, I don't have a problem with that. You understand?
Okay.
So it has to
Mhm.
be like kakra, kakra. It has to be small. And then if you get small, you not that you appreciate, but you keep it safe. Like you keep the space to be a safe space and
Okay.
you don't use it against them. And that's what would encourage more openness, more vulnerability. Because he would also realize that you as a couple get closer, right? Your
Okay.
relationship gets even better the more open you are with each other, you know. But yeah, I think that's what I would say to that question.
What okay. What concerns men the most when it comes to their mental health?
Well, so I'll probably break this down to, I guess, African men or Ghanaian men, even.
Yeah. Hmm.
In my experience, mental health doesn't come up much, right?
Okay. So
So
is it then the education, the
so
no,
for
go,
I
go
guess
ahead. I'm sorry.
for us, no,
I
that's
have
fine.
another question.
So for us to even begin to think about mental health or our mental health, we have to draw a connection to something, right? So if I go about my whole life and when my mood is kind of down, I call it, oh, tell my slow kakra. Like I've been sort of slow. When I'm anxious about something, it's more like, oh, my smile, shall I make hot, right? And anytime some of that is happening, it's either I just write it out and I don't draw the connection that this probably has something with, like my mood, i.e., possible depression or possible anxiety. Like even though maybe sometimes I go out and hang out with my friends and I feel better, I don't draw the connection of mental health, right? So
Okay.
the conversation isn't even out there like that for us to draw the connections, for me to tell you what is the problem when it comes to kind of mental health for the average Ghanaian man.
Okay.
Because we are not talking about mental health like that.
Okay.
You
Okay.
understand?
So
Yeah.
I get you. So then with that, maybe my next question will get to that. So then what are the challenges, right? That makes it difficult for men to, first of all, acknowledge their mental health. They will come to
Mhm.
care for their mental health.
Yeah. Well, bringing it back to, I think I was on a live once when, well, I don't know where I saw this, but somebody said many men were not necessarily raised to be men, they were raised to not be women, right?
Okay.
So,
Mhm.
because historically mental health related stuff has been targeted at women, many of us grew up or many of us see it as a woman's thing. So, if it's a woman's thing, then get me as far from it as possible. You understand? Because I'm
Yeah.
not a woman, I don't want to be associated with anything that's a woman's thing. So that's why
Okay.
when you're having a conversation about men and their mental health, we have to talk about ways to discuss mental health that men can hear, right? As
Okay.
opposed to how historically it's been done, which is associated with women and how they do things. Because the men wouldn't want to do things that way.
Okay. Okay. So so it's more of the socialization. That's the
Mm.
challenge.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Hmm.
So is it the same challenge for them taking care of their mental health as well?
Hmm.
Do they see maybe me taking care of myself, right? Let me say I have a mental health day,
Hmm.
when something is bad going on, I call my friend and we talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and we drag it out and all of
Hmm.
that. Do they see it like as a woman's thing?
So the way you just described it, yes,
Hmm.
they see
Okay.
they see that as a woman's thing, right? And
Okay.
so many men, actually, in my experience at least, many men do things that help them improve their mental health. They just don't call it that, or they just don't draw that
Okay.
connection,
So what
right?
are some
You
of
know, because
those things?
I mean, if you take away the toxic manosphere, right? Many
Mhm.
men do go to the gym, play soccer, like
Okay.
hang out on weekends with their friends,
Okay.
doing things, right? That
Yeah.
camaraderie, that's spending time with friends and stuff like that. That's good for anybody's mental health, right? And when men do
Yeah.
it, it's good for their
Hmm.
mental health.
Hmm.
I mean, happy hour. I mean, if you remove the actual drinking from it, like the time with friends and family is good for
Hmm.
their mental health. Like I said, the gym is good for their mental health and their physical health too, right? If your soccer team is doing well, when you watch them and they win, the elation, it's good for your mental health.
Okay.
Now, of course, when they're like Manchester United, we're always losing.
Okay.
That's on the other end,
Only
right? So
blend to it.
yeah, exactly right. So many people do these things that are good for their mental health. We just don't draw that connection. So it becomes where the problem typically is that when somebody's actively struggling
Hmm.
and you try to draw the connection to the things that they can do for their mental health, it's where this like the problem is, right? So to the average person who probably is doing okay, mental health may never come up because I go to the gym regularly. So like I go and if I do boxing, I punch it, I get emotions out. Me and my friend we hang out on the weekends, watch soccer, maybe play some video games over the internet. I stay in touch with them. My work is going relatively well. It can be stressful sometimes, but when it is, me and my friends hang out, we go and drink a little that weekend. We keep it going. Conversation about like, are you taking your care of yourself may never really come up because they are, in fact, taking care of themselves. So I think it's when people are struggling.
But then, to pause you there, is it intentional though,
It's
right?
not.
I think that's the missing the
Hmm.
connection, right?
Yeah.
Because if I know, right? So if I know that um what okay, so like my summer garden, right?
Hmm.
It could just be a garden I plant, I go away, right? But
Yeah.
if I am intentional about it, that this is my summer activity, it helps me to get out there. I'm going to get in the sun. It gives me some sort of joy, some sort of activities to look forward to. And in a
Yeah.
way, it's improving my mental health, it's caring for myself.
Hmm.
Then, with that intentionality, how I go about it is going to be different, right?
Yeah.
And the same way, like if I know that maybe me being with my friends as watching soccer, it's part of how we take care of our mental health.
Hmm.
When I come in, how and I ask you, how are you doing? And you're like, oh,
Hmm.
I'm okay. Now I'm going to like dig deeper, right?
Right.
When we are watching the soccer and you are making certain remarks that, oh, at the tire or this week
Hmm.
drained me, I'm going to catch on to that and be like,
Right.
hey, what is going on? Maybe this is the second time that you said this, or when the person who is always yelling and running
It's more
around,
quiet. Hmm.
a week comes and he's all of a sudden quiet. I'm going to be like, hey, after us watching, I'm going to put them aside and say, hey, today, even though we don't like it when you yell and all of that, but you are not yourself, right? You are not
What's up with
what's
that?
going
Hmm.
on. So for me, maybe, yeah,
Oh
like
yeah.
is there intention behind? Are they being
Many
intentional?
many times we're not intentional about it
Okay.
at all. Many times it's very, especially the conversation aspect of it. Many times it's very, very surface level, right?
Mhm,
But
mhm.
when you think about, so I guess what it is because it's not intentional. We don't get the full benefit of it.
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But for the people that actually do, they get some benefit of it and it keeps them
Mhm.
afloat when they could
Mhm.
get a whole lot more if they were
Mhm.
intentional, right?
Mhm.
For me, the bigger problem is for the people who are actively struggling,
Mhm.
right? And because they are not intentional about their mental health, they are drowning in it. And
Yeah.
any
Mhm.
conversation about doing something to take care of themselves or doing something for their mental health feels like they're being weak, right? And
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
drowning, right? It's almost like why?
Yeah.
You understand? So
Mhm.
if anything, like of course, we're going to encourage even the people who are already doing some of the activities to be more intentional about it. But like the people that I really want to catch are the people who are drowning, but their idea of masculinity is keeping them there because they don't want to do anything that's
Yeah.
like, it's like, woman thing. So, because yeah, I'm right there with you. Sometimes when we meet to watch games, and we can, I remember when I was at the University of Ghana, when I was more into soccer, we could argue for hours. And it would be with somebody whose second name you don't even know. In fact, you probably don't know his real name. You only know his nickname. We would meet every weekend for games and argue, but you don't even know their actual real name. If tomorrow he's not
Mhm.
there, you don't even know. Like you don't even know where his actual dorm is to go
Yeah.
ask
To
like
go
yo
look for him.
to go look like
Yeah.
yo, hey, this friend that I've been meeting every week for
Mhm.
the whole season. Today I didn't see them. I just want to check and see if they're okay. Wouldn't you don't know that because it's very, very surface level,
Mhm.
and I think we can all do better by being a bit more intentional and exploring a little bit more, And I think sometimes when the conversations about men, taking care of themselves come up, the strategies that we throw at them are strategies that they attribute to women. So then
Okay.
they block it out.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I get what you say, right?
Mhm.
I get it. And also I am more also often I tell people to diversify your toolbox,
Right.
right? To diversify your toolbox. Like there is something to be said about, you know, going to get a massage, getting your nails done, right?
Hmm.
Because some people are just touch deprived. Go let somebody touch you,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
it can help you in a way. There is something, and it could look like vanity when we women do it, right? But there is something about doing skincare or having an evening routine. It can seem so vain, but it's also there's something so soothing, so winding down in it. So be in touch with your body, so connected with your body where it's evening, you take a shower. I'm not saying have a 10 step, but you take a shower, you brush your teeth, you make sure you are moisturized. There is something so soothing and being
Hmm.
intentional and connecting with yourself about it that I think of course men have these
Hmm.
activities but then they lack that a lot of that connection of things, right?
Hmm.
Connecting with themselves, being in touch with their own body, being in touch with their own emotions, sitting with themselves, just being soft, right? I think we have colonized the word soft.
Softness. Yeah. So
Soft, there is
that
something
see
really
that's the point
soothing
that I was
about
trying
that.
to make. That's the point that I was trying to make, right? For
Mhm.
somebody who hasn't, dipped their toes even into conversations about mental health.
Mhm.
If some of the first things that they're hearing that they can do for their mental health and their self-care is massage and, doing their nails and stuff, like they will block you out. They won't give it a second thought. You
Okay.
understand? Because
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like it's almost like an immediate what you call it connection. Again, they have been socialized to associate certain things with women, and anything that is associated with women isn't for them,
Isn't for them. Okay.
right? So if you're
Yeah.
trying to get them into the door, massage and nail care probably isn't it. You understand? We can maybe get them to be more intentional about the gym that they're already going. We can get them
Okay.
to be more intentional about like when they meet to watch games after the
Mhm,
arguments, more kind
mhm,
of check in with
mhm,
each other. We can get them to be
mhm,
more intentional about when they are drinking to make sure they limit that and then spend a little bit more time just talking about their lives and stuff like that. And
mhm,
with time, they will get to the place where again, like I can only diversify my toolbox. I have to have something before I can begin to diversify, right? Like nipa no ni bi. Then the options you're giving them are like things that they have.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay.
So that's
I
that's
get you.
that's what it's like. We have to bring them in ever so slowly, you know. Kakra kakra. You every day
Yeah,
when I
yeah.
tell you these things, that you say I'm coddling them, but why?
No, I
They'll
think
sleep.
we approach it differently, right? We
Mhm,
approach
mhm,
it differently, right? And I can tell you, like, I cuddle women, right? I
mhm,
cuddle women, right? The way maybe if a woman does something, I will talk to them. Isn't the way that, but I get it,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
What what you are saying speaks of the spectrum, right? Of the
Yeah.
spectrum of things, right? That and also again going back to that developmental approach that you are taking like a developmental approach and you are building on it little by little, little by little.
Mhm.
So if there is somebody, especially if you are drowning, of course, massage isn't
On your list, nowhere near your list, right? Mhm.
exactly. But also it's also important that you also have you also have things, right? So you also have things so that if a situation that drowns you come, the drowning wouldn't be too much as well,
Right, right. Yeah.
right? The drowning wouldn't be like oftentimes we tell people do not wait for something
Bad
bad
to happen.
happen before you go to
Mm.
therapy, then it's going to take time to get you to a stable place then before we do the work versus
Mhm.
if you're already in therapy, you're already at some level. So
Yes.
it's like we are something that could have taken you maybe 6 months for us to figure out. We can use one
Ridiculous.
session to figure it out. And
Mhm.
then you are like, okay, this is right. So
Mhm.
yeah, so there is it's nuance in a way
Mhm.
that it's very important to have something, right? Have something, have something, have something. And there's something that you are going to have shouldn't be a woman, right?
Right.
It
Mhm.
shouldn't be a woman. It shouldn't include no woman in there. It should be
Right.
solely your responsibilities and your practices, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why many times one of the I tell people about what I call mental health non-negotiables, right? Your sleep, your diet, and your exercise habits. That probably doesn't involve anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Right. These are all things that you can take care of on your own. Right. So I always encourage people be intentional about those things. Like, because
Mm-hmm.
again, we especially for those of us in the diaspora, we are in this grind culture where we're grind, 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 grind. We're always at work. Some people have two, three jobs and they barely have enough hours of sleep per night. So they're always angry. They're always struggling in their relationships, right? So for such a person, like, okay, slow it down a bit, get a few more hours of sleep. When you wake up, eat something late, give your body something to work with, right? When you go to work, some people will say things like, "Well, I have three jobs. I don't have to exercise. Like my job is exercise enough, right?" But then it goes back to the intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
You are working the things of even annoying you, right? But when you actually make time every so often to just take a walk leisurely, that feels different. So like some of those things are more basic that if it draws people in and they can begin to do those things, right? Improve their sleep, improve their eating habits, improve their exercise habits and stuff like that. That sets them out on a good course. And then gradually every now and then, throwing in a massage wouldn't be so far-fetched because they're working on these things, right? Reminding them that when you go out to hang out with your friends, the conversation doesn't have to be about girls and their big behinds. Like it can really be about your friendships. And it also doesn't have to be always about work. It can really go a little bit beyond the surface. And sometimes even when we talk about work, it's like, well, how's work going? Telling my manager the fool. After that, it's like the conversation is over. Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes like me and one of my closest friends, Tony, when we're talking about work, after he complains about his boss, we can actually talk about things that he can do differently at work. And sometimes that makes a
Mm-hmm.
difference to his experience at work. But
Mm-hmm.
when I was younger, definitely when we were in the University of Ghana and soon after I graduated, we don't talk about work into that deep for even anybody to have a strategy that can help you.
Yeah.
Because all
Yeah.
we want to talk about is the surface level. And believe me, when it comes to sports, there is enough to talk about for hours.
It
I
is.
promise
It
you.
is.
I promise
Yeah.
you. I
And
can
it
talk
wouldn't
about
be
Man
going
U.
around in
I
circles.
can talk about Manchester United for 6 hours, and I
Yes.
won't be bored.
And you
but
won't solve their problems for them too.
exactly, but that's not, that won't be helpful. So that's how we want to get people in the intentionality of it,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, even me, as I'm sitting here like this, most days, right? I lotion face, hands, feet. Because if other people won't see it, what's the point? you know, and you would think,
Oh
you
my God. Omo di omo
as
honam
as a,
bare
but
nenam
it's covered, so
barelistic.
mhm,
Honam din din din.
it's
Can you
covered,
imagine?
so it makes no difference, right? As long as it's covered, it makes no difference, So it's small things like that. It's not on our radar, But yeah.
Can you imagine? Hmm. So somebody asked a question specifically. This one is about ADHD when it comes to boys. So
hmm
what are some of the things that makes it difficult for boys, especially black boys, to be misdiagnosed or for the signs to be missed?
Oh, I mean, the easy answer to that one is racism,
Okay.
right? Because
Mhm.
historically, the signs of ADHD were modeled on boys, right? So
Okay.
it's actually easier to see it in boys. However, for
Okay.
black boys, when the teachers see it,
Hmm.
historically, I don't reckon that it's still the same today. Wink, wink.
Okay.
When the teachers see it, they assume it's because daddy's not home, it's because mommy's ghetto, it's because
Hmm.
something isn't happening right at home, and that's why the boy is acting out.
Okay.
Same behavior in a white kid. The teacher goes, "What's going on? Cool, this kid doesn't sit still. He's so impulsive. Could he have
Hmm.
ADHD? Let's talk to the school psychologist." Right? But for the black kid, they're assuming that it's other things going on at home. So why he's acting out that way, and they want to, discipline them, or they want to have parent teacher conference and stuff like that. Like if he doesn't stop, we're kicking him out and stuff like that. So for boys, the reason why it often gets missed in black boys really is
Hmm.
kind of that bias, you know,
Hmm.
because the actual symptoms, because the research was primarily done on boys,
Okay.
if the symptoms are there, they usually don't miss
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So how about parents raising boys, right?
Mhm.
What can they attribute to, oh, this is regular boys being boys,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And then what can
What
what
how much what of
things
it
that
is
should make them,
ADHD?
yes, should make
Mhm.
their alarms go off
Go
like
off,
ding 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 ding.
right.
Yeah.
So, so there's the age appropriate stuff, right?
Okay.
Like if you're my 6-year-old, because he has ADHD and autism, sometimes it's difficult for me to get an accurate sense of what an actual 6-year-old looks like, right? But
Hmm.
if your 7, 8, 9-year-old is still jumping up on tables and stuff, jumping around couches and stuff like that consistently, as in not when he's happy and has energy. It's like all day, every day.
That's like his
Like
baseline.
exactly, that's a lot, right? So, and I've told people, so the symptoms may be, and for those of you who don't know, you can go to my page. The symptoms are all there. So the symptoms may be present in a kid sometimes in some places, right? But to diagnose ADHD, at least 6 out of the 9 symptoms for each type have to be present in multiple settings, and that has to be kind of his default. For we need to be able to track it for at least 6 months,
Hmm.
right? So if it's his behavior consistently at home, at school, sometimes at the grocery store, everybody who knows him knows that he acts that way, you know, it's probably beyond the average kid, right? And then we have to talk about functional impairment too. Like, is this something that is then beginning to be an issue at home? It's affecting his studies at school,
Hmm. Yeah.
So those are the things to look out for, symptoms
Yeah.
across, and then it's one of the reasons also where I guess there are some cultural difference to it. So I remember growing up in Ghana, when like every weekend when I was younger, every weekend there was a game. Like we had our neighborhood, we had a couple teams, so we're always playing matches. And during the week we have training. So when I come back home from school, sometimes my mom will begrudgingly let me go play football in the field. So that's energy that I'm exerting, right? And
Yeah.
and then
Hmm.
again, we grew up in a more communal living, so there are many parents whose kids will be just out and about, running around doing things.
Yeah.
Until by the time he comes home, he's already tired, right? So as a parent, you don't see the plenty
Jumping.
energy like that, and also that's increased exercise help kids focus a little bit better. So they probably will be doing okay in school. Even if they're not doing well, you just think about like they're not smart enough. But when you come to the US where most families are more kind of that nuclear family and we do a lot of things indoors, then the activity will be in your face,
Hmm.
right? So you will see that more as a problem, and hence, begin to talk to maybe teachers like, hey, does he do this at school as well? And it's like, yeah, 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 and then that's when you need to ultimately, even with all of these things that we've talked about, ultimately you need to talk to the child's pediatrician, or, talk to a specialist, because sometimes you may see all of these things and we can still explain it in a way that feels like that would be because of your child and his own kind of baseline normalcy. Yeah.
Okay. As we are concluding this conversation, what is the one thing that you want men to understand? Um, what is the one thing you want men to understand about mental health as a male psychologist?
So let me do first what men should understand about masculinity, right?
Hmm.
I think, right. Honestly, do believe that, masculinity or what it means to be a man outside of biology, a lot of it is just societally constructed,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So as you get older, feel free to be a man the way that works for you and your family, right? Are there some people that if they see would say certain things? Yeah, but forget them. You understand? Like be a man in your own way. And I think when you actually allow yourself to do that, it's half of the mental health work, to be honest. Because a lot of, I mean, many men, the weight they carry on their shoulders is because they are trying to live up to some measure of masculinity. Like I'm the man of this house, I should be able to do this. I'm the man of this house. Like if something happens and I don't have it all, together, then what? I'm the man of this house, I'm the man of this house, right? And it's affecting so much in their lives, right? So if you really allow yourself to redefine what it means to be a man in a way that actually works for you and your family, half of the work is done, right? And then mental health, whether we like it or not, it's not a woman's issue. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. You have a mind. You're a human. You have a life. There are things that would affect your peace of mind and your mental health. So it's important to do things that help your mental health. And the more intentional you are about those things, the more useful those things will be. Like we've talked about. So if you are a gym person, by all means keep that up, but if you actually move it if in addition to wanting to have a six pack, you also think about it as a place where you go to de-stress and maybe let out some whatever it is that you're feeling, let out some emotions, it gives a whole new meaning and benefit to the same thing that you're already doing, right? When you meet your friends to watch a game, spend a few minutes of that to just check in, right? Let's move the conversation away from the surface a little bit. Let's go a little bit deeper. And to the younger ones, Charlie, not everything has to be about women, to be honest. Like, I feel like, again, it's probably easy for me to say because I'm already married. Like, I'm not trying to get a wife, right? I get that, but there are so many times when we are having some conversations and it goes really quickly back to like what women would do or what women do or don't do. It's like, what has that got to do with anything? Like, we're trying to build up men here. Like, the conversation shouldn't have anything to do with women. So yeah, those are, I guess, what I have to say about masculinity, mental health, and I guess working to improve yourself as a man.
Okay. Is there anything else in as we
So
are
rounding up,
closing?
I think we've said it all, or we've said a lot of
Mhm.
it, but this is a topic that is always ongoing. So if people have more
Mhm.
questions, please feel free to send them in. We could always make short videos to try to answer some of it. And hey, if we have to do another episode like this, I'd love, having these conversations because once again, it helps put it out there that not everybody thinks the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so far, fingers crossed that a lot of people feel this way. I think a lot of people respect me, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so because they respect me, when I'm sharing some of these things, they pause a little bit because they're not likely to be like, oh, you understand? Like, I think when we're on Snowflakes live, somebody like, Nana is always disagreeing with me, but I don't think Nana ever thinks I'm less of a man, right?
We don't know
Nana,
that.
well, at least he
We
doesn't
don't.
express it. At least he doesn't express it, right? Nana always says, Nana always says, as for you, Dr. Lou, you are always thinking about the exceptions or you are always thinking about the extremes or something like that. But I don't get the sense that he's ever doubting my masculinity, right? And I guess where I'm going with this is because I feel that people respect me and they're not doubting that, then they get a sense of, so being a man can look a little different. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to fit, a certain mold. But yeah, that's all that
Okay.
I have for folks.
All right.
Um,
Yeah. So yeah. So this was. Thank you all for
hanging out
joining.
with us. Yeah.
Yeah, and hanging out with us. Like a few things. I think what really stood out in this conversation, like masculinity, is how you do it. Right. It's how you do it. It's how you run it. Your home is how you do it. How you run it. Your mental health is your priority. It is your responsibility. It's not a responsibility of anyone to take care of your mental health or to make sure that you are mentally well or you are mentally not well. And like we said, your partner could be a risk factor or a protective factor, right? Some people I identify as a risk factor. So beware. But, we as women, it's not our responsibility as well. I know this conversation was for men, but we as women, it's not our responsibility to be always at the forefront, to be like, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure, let me bend myself. Let me do this so that you do this, so that you do that. But it is the primary responsibility falls on the man to do these things. So thank you very much for hanging out with us. This is the Afro Mind podcast. Every week, every Sunday, we upload. Send us your questions. Send us topics that you want us to discuss from the perspective of two mental health professionals, Ghanaian mental health professionals. And I will see you next week.
Next week.
Take care of yourself. And if you can, take care
Bye
of yourself.
bye.